South Asia is a region where densely populated river valleys and fertile plains contrast with sparsely populated mountain ranges, harsh deserts, and tropical forests. This region is home to approximately one-fifth of the world's entire population. So, where is South Asia? Think of South Asia as a huge triangle that extends from the snow-clad peaks of the Himalaya Mountains down to a point that extends into the Indian Ocean. This triangle is bordered on the west by the Arabian Sea and on the east by the Bay of Bengal. This landmass is sometimes called the Indian subcontinent because it is very large and almost like a continent by itself. It lies on a part of the Earth's crust that was not always attached to Asia. Many millions of years ago, the tectonic plate carrying this area moved northward and collided with the rest of Asia. Rocks crumpled and tilted skyward under the mighty impact, creating the mountain ranges of the Himalayas. As the Indian plate pushed under the Asian plate, the Himalayas were lifted up to a height of about 8 kilometers above sea level. And they are still growing. Mount Everest, the world's highest mountain, rises 8,848 meters above sea level, and its height increases a little bit each year. India is by far the largest country in South Asia. To the west of India lies Pakistan, and Bangladesh borders India on the east. Nepal and Bhutan are two small countries in the Himalayas. The region also includes the island country of Sri Lanka and the many islands of the Maldives. There are three major geographic regions in South Asia: the northern mountain rim, dominated by the Himalayas, the plains of the Indus and the Ganges rivers, and the Deccan Plateau toward the south. If you were traveling into the Himalayas from the border between India and Nepal, you would first cross a lowland area with many rivers running through it. Then, you would wind through the foothills before descending into a high valley, where you might spend some time wandering through the streets of Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. From there, you would climb up from the valley floor to a rim where you would see the snow-capped Himalayas stretching for miles in the distance. The word Himalaya means home of the snows in the Nepali language. If you were a backpacker and had time to hike for many days, you would reach the foot of Mount Everest, the world's highest mountain. West of Nepal, the mountains become drier, and the Himalayas merge with the Karakoram mountain range. The great rivers of South Asia have their sources in the Himalayas. The Indus River flows through the North Indian province of Ladakh from its source in Tibet. It is joined by several tributaries as it continues through arid country into Pakistan. This river is surrounded by desert throughout much of its course and is a very important source of water for the people of Pakistan. The most important river in India is the Ganges. It flows through a broad plain, which is densely populated and important for agriculture. The soils are very fertile because they come from rich earth materials that the river has carried down from the mountains and deposited during floods. Earth materials deposited by moving water are called alluvium, so the Ganges Plain is an example of an alluvial plain. Near its delta in Bangladesh, the Ganges is joined by the Brahmaputra River, which also originates high in the mountains. Moving south of the Indo-Ganges Plain toward India's triangular tip, we find a highland area known as the Deccan Plateau. In the west, the edge of this plateau is formed by high, steep hills called the Western Ghats. The plateau slopes downward towards the east, where it is bounded by the low hills of the Eastern Ghats. The word Ghat means a chain of mountains. The same word is also used to describe a flight of steps leading down to a river, like the Ghats, which you can see along the Ganges in the Indian city of Varanasi. The Deccan Plateau is important for agriculture because most of its soils are fertile. The volcanic rocks which make up the plateau are also rich in mineral ores. Narrow coastal plains lie between the Western Ghats and the Arabian Sea. Each year, these plains receive a great deal of rainfall during the summer months. Imagine you are in the Indian city of Varanasi on a scorching June day. It hasn't rained for months, and by noon the temperature is more than 40 degrees Celsius. Bicycle and auto traffic is heavy and people are short-tempered. Some escape from the heat by swimming in the Ganges. The countryside is parched and the ponds are beginning to dry up. On the fringes of the Thar Desert near Pakistan, nomads are on the move, searching for water and food for their livestock. School is out because it's too hot to study. Young people from well-to-do families spend their vacations in the cool mountain areas to escape the heat. In June, the clouds begin to build. There's still no rain, but now it is very humid, even though it is still very hot. Finally, the summer monsoon arrives, bringing welcome rain. The monsoons, which are so important in South Asian life, are seasonal shifts in the direction of the winds. In fact, the word monsoon comes from the Arabic word for season. The summer monsoon brings rain, but the winter monsoon is dry. So these seasonal reversals in wind direction bring alternating periods of rain and drought to South Asia. When the summer rains arrive, there is great rejoicing among the people. This year, the rains have come on time and the crop harvest will be good. The rain from the summer monsoon moves in from the tropical southern seas, southwest of the subcontinent. Although welcomed by the people, the life-giving monsoon can also bring destruction. High winds cause mudslides and blow down trees. Streams and rivers turn into muddy torrents, and throughout the summer flooding is a constant threat. Waves generated by wind make fishing dangerous for fishermen out in their tiny vessels along the coast. As the moisture-filled air from the sea moves over the southern tip of South Asia, it is warmed by the hot surface of the land. Rain clouds form as the heated air rises and cools. Cool air cannot hold as much moisture as warm air. As air is pushed up over the Western Ghats, it becomes even cooler and drops much of its moisture as rain. There is so much rain that water-loving vegetation is plentiful on the coastal plain and on mountain slopes that face the Arabian Sea. When the air descends on the other side of the mountains, it has already lost much of its moisture. As a result, the summer monsoon brings less rain to the Deccan Plateau and the Eastern Ghats. As the summer progresses, the monsoon rains move further and further inland and northward, usually reaching the Indo-Ganges plain in mid to late June. The south-facing slopes of the Himalayas capture the rest of the monsoonal moisture. Lands on the northern side of these mountains get very little rainfall. In the autumn, the land surface of interior Asia becomes much cooler than the seas surrounding the subcontinent. This creates a high-pressure system, which causes the wind to reverse direction and blow from the northeast across the Himalayas from the vast cold lands of interior Asia. The Himalayan peaks block most of the extremely cold air from Central Asia. As a result, temperatures in most of South Asia are comfortably warm during the dry winter months. In the spring, the heat begins to build again, and people anxiously wait for the next southwest monsoon. South Asian agriculture, which developed thousands of years ago, is adapted to the weather changes brought by the alternating wet and dry monsoons. One of their most important crops is rice. Rice is a type of grass that was first cultivated in South Asia thousands of years ago. It can be grown under many kinds of conditions, and there are thousands of different kinds. Wet rice is grown in small fields called paddies. These paddies are surrounded by mounds of earth so that water can be let into and out of the growing area. When it's time to plant the rice, the paddies are watered and the muddy ground is plowed to loosen the soil and prepare it for planting. After the seeds are planted, the paddies are flooded with water. When the seedlings begin to crowd each other, they are pulled out of the soft, muddy earth and tied into bundles. Then, they are replanted in a nearby field where they will have plenty of room to grow. The field is kept covered by a few centimeters of water until the grain begins to ripen. Then, the fields are drained and the rice is harvested. In some parts of Asia, the process of separating the grain from the chaff, or husk, that surrounds it, is still done by foot. Many other crops, such as millets and cotton, are grown on lands that are not well suited for rice production. Although most parts of South Asia are dependent on the summer monsoon for moisture, some regions get much more rain than others. One of the wettest regions lies along India's southwest coast bordering the Arabian Sea. Streams meander through the narrow coastal plain. There are many coastal lagoons. The climate is ideal for growing coconut palms and rubber trees. Rice grows well in this region too. In some places, the seaward-facing slopes of the Western Ghats are still covered with dense tropical forests. People have used these forests for building materials and firewood for centuries. A few elephants still help with harvesting the forest trees, but many more elephants were used for this work in the past. Today, much of the forest has been cut, and the elephants are primarily used in special events and celebrations. The climate of this area is also suitable for raising other crops, such as tea and pepper. Pepper vines twist around trees. The vines produce peppercorns that are ground and used to season foods. Tea plantations can be found at elevations of a few hundred meters. The long, leathery leaves are harvested year-round in southern India. Another very wet region is found on the southern side of the Himalayas, in northeast India and southern Nepal. Some of the forests in this area are home to tigers and the rare one-horned Asian rhino. As in southern India, much of the forest has been cut to clear land for rice production and to grow other types of crops. Most of the Deccan Plateau lies on the dry side of the Western Ghats and gets much less rainfall than the southwest coast. On the plateau there are grassy areas, and the natural vegetation is more spread out. Many crops grown here have to be irrigated, and deep wells are dug to get water. Sugarcane is one of several crops that do well in areas that have long dry seasons. This plant is native to South Asia. After harvesting, the cane is crushed to release the sweet juices. Then, the juice is heated until most of the water evaporates, leaving a thick molasses from which raw sugar is extracted. There are even drier regions in the northwest. The landscape becomes increasingly barren as you move westward toward the edge of the Thar Desert. Only a few types of drought-resistant crops, such as sorghums and millets, can be grown here without irrigation. Much of the land is used as pasture for livestock. The area's most important work animal is the camel. Camels can live for several weeks without water. They're even used to plow fields. Because the monsoon brings so little rain to this region, water is precious. It is captured and stored in ponds and reservoirs. A different kind of agriculture is found in the Himalayan highlands. Potatoes and barley are the principal crops in India's northern province of Ladakh. They are among the few crop plants that will grow at very high elevations. People in these highlands raise cattle, sheep, and goats. They also raise yaks, the shaggy beasts that are native to the region. Yaks thrive at high elevations. To review, the subcontinent of South Asia is separated from the rest of Asia by the Himalayan mountains. These mountains were pushed up long ago by the collision of two tectonic plates. Streams from melting snow run down these mountains and join together to form the great rivers that flow through the Indus-Ganges plain. South of this fertile plain is an upland area called the Deccan Plateau, which is bounded on the east and west by mountain ranges called the Ghats. In general, the driest areas are toward the north and west, with desert conditions existing throughout much of Pakistan. The wettest areas are on India's southwest coast and in the lowlands of northeastern India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. The climate and natural vegetation of the subcontinent are greatly affected by the monsoons. These monsoons are seasonal shifts in wind direction that bring moist air and rain from the warm seas during the summer months and dry air from Central Asia during the winter. Agricultural production is also affected by the monsoons. Different kinds of plants are grown in different regions, depending on the amount of moisture brought to the area by the monsoon rains. South Asia has a tremendous variety of landscapes and resources to be utilized by the many people that populate the area. They must be used wisely for the region's people to prosper.